I stared at the deed in his hands and realized my money had built a house I wasn't welcome in. The papers trembled slightly between his fingers, though his smile stayed firm, smug even. Behind him the house gleamed. Fresh paint, new windows, the scent of polished wood wafting through the open door. From inside, I heard laughter. The kind of laughter that cuts, not warms. I swallowed hard and forced my voice to stay steady. "You bought this? With my money." He looked at me like I had overstepped. "It's ours," he said, casual, dismissive. "But mostly mine. You wanted stability for the family, didn't you? Well, this is it." I blinked at him. Stability. That was the word he always threw at me whenever I questioned where the savings went. The word he used to silence me when bills piled high and I worked extra hours. Stability. And here it stood before me, but not for me. Then she appeared, his wife, gliding down the hallway as if she'd lived there her whole life. Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Oh, don't pout," she said, voice dripping with mock kindness. "We'll decorate the guest room for you. You'll always have a little corner here." Her words stung worse than a slap. I clenched my fists to stop them from shaking. The guest room? My savings paid the down payment. Without me, there is no house. She tilted her head, almost enjoying my pain. "And yet, you're standing outside while I hold the keys." Before I could answer, her mother stepped in. The mother-in-law, a woman who never wasted a chance to remind me of my place. Her eyes traveled over me, slow and critical, as if I were the intruder. "Better stay in your lane," she sneered. "Don't forget who runs this household now." For a second, I couldn't breathe. The three of them, united, lined up against me in the doorway of the house my money had built. I tried to hold my ground. I worked years for those savings. I sacrificed vacations, clothes, dinners out, everything to make sure we had a future. And now you're telling me I'm a guest in what I paid for. My husband's eyes flickered. Guilt, maybe. But he buried it under a shrug. "You're overreacting. I did what needed to be done. A man provides. That's all this is." I laughed bitterly, though it came out broken. "A man provides? With whose money? You didn't provide, you took." His wife stepped closer, lowering her voice, almost hissing. "Stop embarrassing yourself. You should be grateful. At least now we have a proper home. Isn't that what you always wanted?" I met her gaze, refusing to flinch. "What I wanted was respect. Clearly that doesn't come with this house." The mother-in-law crossed her arms. "Respect is earned. And you've done nothing but cling. My daughter deserves better. She deserves a man who makes her feel secure. This house is proof she chose wisely." Each word felt like a nail hammered into me. I could have screamed. I could have begged. Instead, I chose silence for a moment, letting their arrogance echo in the hollow air. Then I straightened. "You think this is finished? That I'll just step aside, smile politely, and fade into the background?" My husband shifted uncomfortably. "Don't make this ugly." "Ugly?" My voice cracked like lightning. "What's uglier than betrayal? You didn't just buy a house, you buried me alive in it." His wife smirked. "Drama suits you, but it won't change reality." I turned, forcing myself to walk away, though every step felt like dragging chains. My heart pounded, my throat burned, but my back stayed straight. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. At the curb, I paused and glanced back at the shining facade. Their silhouettes filled the doorway, smiling, victorious, certain I had no fight left in me. I lowered my voice just for myself. If they think I'll stay silent, they don't know me yet. The first crack came not from them, but from the neighbors. I was in my new place, a tiny rental apartment with peeling wallpaper and a leaky faucet that dripped all night. The smell of stale carpet clung to the air, so different from the scent of fresh paint at the house I'd paid for. I tried to settle in, but every time I unpacked a box, I thought about the life I had built for them while leaving myself with nothing. A knock rattled the thin door. When I opened it, a middle-aged woman from the next unit stood there, arms full of laundry. "You're the one who helped pay for that fancy house down the street, aren't you?" she asked casually. My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" She chuckled, almost gossipy. "The new owners have been bragging. Said they got a free ride, that somebody else's savings made it all possible. Must be nice, huh?" The words hit me harder than a slap. Bragging. They weren't even ashamed. I thanked her stiffly and shut the door, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the knob. That night, I called him. He let it ring until voicemail. Again and again, no answer. Finally, he picked up, his tone flat. "What do you want now?" "I want the truth," I said. "Did you really tell people you got a free ride? That my money was just a stepping stone?" He sighed, annoyed. "You're twisting everything. We built a home. Why can't you just let it go?" "Because it's my money," I snapped. "And my life you've trampled on." The line went dead. He hung up without another word. For days, silence swallowed me. I felt like a ghost, forgotten, wandering between cracked walls and broken promises. Shame pressed heavy on my chest. What would people think if they knew I'd been used this way? Then one morning, the phone rang. Her voice, his wife. "Don't worry," she said sweetly, though every word dripped with poison. "Your money didn't go to waste." I froze, gripping the receiver so tight my knuckles turned white. "Where exactly did it go?" She laughed, low and mocking. "Oh, don't stress yourself. We know how to handle finances better than you ever could." The click of the line cutting off echoed in my ear. I whispered to myself, "Steady and cold. I'll find out exactly where it went." That night, I pulled out old bank statements, dusty envelopes I'd shoved into drawers, and spread them across the kitchen table. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. Something wasn't right. Withdrawals I didn't remember, checks that didn't match. My heart pounded as I circled them in red ink. The next morning I called the bank. My voice shook, but I forced strength into it. "I need copies of every transfer from my account in the last year." The teller hesitated. "That's a lot of paperwork." "I'll wait," I said firmly. The wait turned into hours, but when the envelope finally arrived, I tore it open with trembling hands. Pages of transactions spilled out. Hidden transfers, withdrawals disguised as business expenses, and large sums funneled directly into accounts I didn't recognize. My pulse raced. I dialed his number again. He answered this time, sounding irritated. "Why are you bothering me?" "Because I know," I said quietly. "I know there are accounts I never touched. And I will trace every dollar," he stammered. You don't understand how complicated this is." "No," I cut him off. "You don't understand. You think silence means surrender. It doesn't." I hung up before he could reply. The next week, I reached out to an old acquaintance who worked at a mortgage office. Over coffee in a noisy cafe, I slid the statements across the table. "Can you help me?" I asked, my voice low. She scanned the papers, her brow furrowing. "These aren't business expenses. This looks like laundering funds into a mortgage. And, if I'm reading this right, the property deed won't even have your name on it." My throat closed. "You're saying I'm not listed?" She nodded grimly. "If your signature's not there, you have no legal claim." I stumbled home, numb, my head spinning. Hours later, another envelope slid under my apartment door. I tore it open, my heart in my mouth. There it was, the official document, black and white proof. The house was purchased solely under his and his wife's names. My name, erased, as if I had never existed. I sank into the chair, the paper trembling in my hands. For a long time I stared at it until my vision blurred. And then slowly, my tears dried. My jaw clenched. If they thought stripping my name away meant stripping my power, they had made a dangerous mistake. Numbers don't lie. People do. That thought kept me steady as I sat in the far corner of the public library. Papers spread across the table like pieces of a crime scene. The library was almost empty. Just the quiet rustle of pages and the hum of the air conditioner. In that silence, I traced line after line of my financial printouts, my pen circling figures that screamed betrayal. Withdrawals I never made. Transfers I never approved. Thousands disguised as business expenses. I whispered the words under my breath. Business expenses? Whose business? My stomach nodded as I highlighted another column. There it was again, an account I didn't recognize, bleeding my savings dry. And at the bottom of one withdrawal form, bold and cruel, was her name, his wife's signature, on my account. The pen slipped from my fingers, clattering onto the table. My chest tightened until I thought I couldn't breathe. She hadn't just enjoyed the spoils of my work. She had reached directly into my pocket, signing her name over my sacrifice. I pushed the papers away, head in my hands. For a moment, I felt weak, foolish. Maybe I had been too blind, too trusting. Maybe this was my fault for letting them get so close to what I'd built. But then another line caught my eye. Payments, regular ones, small but steady. Each labeled maintenance, and every one of them led to her, the mother-in-law. My hands trembled, but this time not from fear. Rage steadied me. They had siphoned my money like parasites, feeding themselves while telling me I was lucky to have a corner in the house. I needed more proof. Something undeniable. The next morning I walked into the bank with my shoulders squared, clutching the folder under my arm. The clerk behind the counter glanced up, polite but wary. "I need full records," I said. My voice was firm. "Not just summaries. I want images of every check, every withdrawal, every signature tied to my account." She hesitated. "That's confidential. I can't release other people's signatures to you." I leaned closer, my eyes locking on hers. "Other people? This is my account, my money. If someone else has been signing in my place, that means fraud. Are you telling me you're willing to hide that?" Her lips parted, a flush rising to her cheeks. She looked around, lowered her voice, and leaned forward. "I shouldn't show you this, but you deserve to know." A moment later, she slid the papers across the counter. My heart pounded as I flipped through them, and there it was. Her handwriting again. Curling loops, her name bold and careless, scrawled on forms she had no right to touch. My hand stilled on the page. I felt cold, sharp clarity settle over me like armor. "This is all I needed," I said flatly. I carried the stack to the library, fed them one by one into the photocopier until I had duplicates safe from vanishing hands. Each copy was a weapon, each line of ink a nail in the coffin of their lies. Hours passed as I spread everything across the table again, building a timeline. The transfers, the payments, the forged signatures, they formed a map of betrayal. And when I connected the final dots, I saw the shape of their scheme clearly for the first time. It wasn't just greed. It was deliberate, organized, calculated. I sat back, staring at the pile of evidence. My doubt, my hesitation, it all burned away. What replaced it was something far stronger. Steel-hard determination. They thought I was weak, that I would hide in shame. But I had the receipts, and soon the world would know. Still, something nagged at me. A detail I couldn't shake. One last page, folded at the back of the envelope, stamped with words I hadn't noticed before. Mortgage authorization. I smoothed it out, my breath catching. It wasn't for the house I'd already seen. This was a second mortgage. Another property, another set of debts. And at the bottom, where my name should have been, was a signature. My signature, but it wasn't mine. The handwriting was close, practiced, but wrong. Someone had forged my name. I stared at it until my vision blurred, the truth slamming into me like a tidal wave. They hadn't just stolen my savings. They had stolen my identity, used my name, my credit, my trust, to build another layer of their empire. I folded the paper slowly, my fingers steady now, though my blood roared in my ears. They thought I wouldn't find out. They thought the numbers would stay buried, hidden behind walls of lies. But numbers don't lie. And soon, neither would they. They didn't know I had the papers when I knocked on their door. The house looked even bigger up close, the fresh paint shining in the afternoon sun. My money gleamed on those windows, on that polished front porch. I stood there a moment, gripping the folder under my arm, breathing steady before pressing the bell. The door opened, and there she was, my husband's wife. She wore a silk robe, as if she'd already claimed the role of queen in her new castle. Behind her I saw the mother-in-law lounging on a cream sofa, sipping tea like royalty. And then my husband appeared, fake smile plastered on his face. "Well," the wife said, smirking, "look who finally decided to visit." I stepped inside without asking. The air smelled of new leather and expensive candles. My shoes sank into a rug I knew I had paid for. Every detail screamed possession. I sat down slowly, keeping the folder on my lap. Their eyes followed it, but none of them dared ask. "So," I began, my voice calm. This is what my hard work built. The wife let out a sharp laugh. Oh, don't be so dramatic. You think everything's about you. My husband tried to cut in, softer. Please don't start. I just wanted to give her a home. His hand brushed the wife's arm like he needed her strength to face me. That was my cue. I placed the first photocopy on the coffee table, an account statement. Their laughter quieted. Funny thing about lies, I said, eyes locked on the wife. They come with receipts. Her lips twitched. So what? You can't prove intent. People move money around all the time. Her voice was mocking, but the tremble gave her away. I slid out another page, the mortgage record. This time the mother-in-law leaned forward, frowning. You shouldn't have dug into that second mortgage, she muttered. Silence fell. My husband's head whipped toward her, eyes wide. She realized her mistake too late. I leaned back, letting the pause choke them. Interesting. I never mentioned a second mortgage. Color drained from my husband's face. He reached for the papers, but I pulled them back. His voice cracked. It's not what you think. I only wanted stability, for her, for us. For her, I repeated, cold. Using my name, my savings, my signature forged. The wife shifted in her seat, suddenly less bold. She crossed her arms. Fine, maybe things were moved around. But what can you really do? You can't touch us. I stood, gathering the papers, my voice dropping low. Next time we meet, it won't be in your living room. It'll be in court. I snapped the folder shut, the sound sharp as a gavel. Their faces froze, masks slipping into panic. The silk robe, the smug smiles, the false pity, all of it cracked in one instant. I walked out, leaving the echo of my words hanging in their perfect, stolen house. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I prepared. The lawyer's office smelled of leather and old wood polish. Sunlight streamed across a polished desk stacked high with folders and contracts. For once, I wasn't the one on the defensive. I slid my folder of photocopies across to the man in the navy suit and waited. He adjusted his glasses, leafing through the pages with practiced precision. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the scratch of his pen as he circled and underlined. My heart thudded, but I kept my hands folded in my lap. Finally, he looked up. This, he said, tapping the mortgage file, is fraud. Clear as day. A breath I hadn't realized I was holding escaped me. So I'm not crazy. He gave the faintest smile. No, they forged your signature. That alone could ruin them in court. He turned to another page, and here, large withdrawals marked as business expenses. But the accounts don't match any registered business. That's embezzlement, I leaned forward. What about the house? His pen tapped against the margin. Given the source of funds, we can petition to freeze ownership until trial. If we prove fraud, the court could seize it. They won't be living there much longer. The thought of them in that house, sipping tea, laughing about their victory, stirred the fire in me again. Good, I whispered. He flipped one more page, frowning. And this note, the notary initials. Did you know the mother-in-law was involved? I sat straighter. What? She pressured a notary to overlook irregularities in the paperwork. That's obstruction. Adds weight to the case. The pieces clicked together. Not just greed, but conspiracy. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. We'll file suit. Fraud. Forgery. Misappropriation of funds. They'll fight back. But they're not prepared for the paper trail you've built. For the first time in weeks, I felt the ground steady beneath me. I nodded slowly. File everything. Freeze their accounts. Don't give them a chance to move another dollar. The lawyer reached for his phone. Consider it done. They underestimated you. I met his gaze, steady and cold. They always did. The rest moved quickly. Forms signed, fees discussed. Each page felt like a weapon sharpened. Yes, the legal fees bit into me, but the sting was worth it. Every dollar I spent now was an investment in my dignity. That night, I walked out of the office into the cool evening air. The weight on my chest was lighter, replaced by something else. Resolve. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was building my strike. Days later, the papers were served. Accounts frozen, lawsuits filed. The walls they had built with my money began to crack, not from shouting or revenge, but from the steady force of justice. Still, the war was only beginning. My lawyer called with the final piece of news. "The court has accepted the filings," he said. "First hearing in 3 weeks. Their house is under injunction. They can't sell it. They can't transfer it. It's locked." I closed my eyes, the words sinking deep. 3 weeks. 3 weeks until everything shifted. "Good," I said, voice low but firm. "Let them sit in their stolen palace. Let them taste what's coming." I hung up, staring out the window. For the first time, I smiled. Not from joy, but from the calm certainty of a predator setting the trap. Cliffhanger. The countdown had begun. A court date was set, and soon, the house they stole might no longer be theirs. The gavel struck, and their faces drained. The courtroom was cold, not in temperature but in tone. Wooden benches creaked as people shifted. Whispers floated from the back, a hushed tide of curiosity. At the front, the judge's face was carved from stone. No sympathy, no indulgence, only authority. I sat at the plaintiff's table, spine straight, folder of evidence neatly stacked in front of me. On the other side sat my husband, his wife, and the mother-in-law. Their confidence was gone, replaced by stiff shoulders and darting eyes. The same people who had laughed in my face now trembled in silence. The clerk called the case, and the proceedings began. My lawyer stood first, presenting the evidence with clean, deliberate strokes. Bank statements, withdrawals disguised as business expenses, photocopies of signatures, mine, except they weren't mine. Each page was a blade slicing through their story. The judge adjusted his glasses. "These signatures. You claim they are yours?" My husband's voice cracked. "Yes, Your Honor." The expert witness shook his head. "No, they are forgeries, easily identified under magnification. Not the plaintiff's handwriting." The gavel struck once, echoing like a warning shot. The wife began to cry, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Her performance was flawless, but the courtroom wasn't buying it. Then came the money trail. The accountant traced every dollar, how my savings became the down payment, how funds were funneled into accounts shared by the wife and mother-in-law. Not only was the plaintiff defrauded, the accountant said, but additional loans were taken under forged consent, the mother-in-law snapped. "That's not true. I only told the notary to hurry."
"I didn't force anyone!"
Her voice echoed, shrill, drawing murmurs from the gallery. The judge's eyes narrowed. "So you admit involvement in the signing process?" Her mouth opened, then closed. No answer. When it was my turn, I stood, steady as stone. My lawyer handed me the folder, but I didn't need to look. I knew every page by heart. "I trusted them," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the room. "Every hour I worked, every dollar I saved, it was meant to build a life, not to fund lies. These papers don't just show numbers. They show betrayal. They show greed." My husband leaned forward, desperate. "Please," he whispered loudly, "we can fix this." I turned to him, unflinching. "You already did, by showing me who you are." The courtroom stilled. His eyes dropped, and he said nothing more. One by one, witnesses came forward. A neighbor testified how they had overheard the wife bragging, calling it the easiest house we ever got. Another spoke about how the mother-in-law boasted at a gathering, saying, "It pays to have fools around who trust too much." Each word tightened the noose. By the time closing arguments were made, the mask was gone. The three of them sat hollow, drained, waiting for a mercy that would never come. The judge's voice rang clear. "The evidence is overwhelming. This was fraud, supported by forgery and deceit. The property in question will be repossessed and sold. Proceeds will cover the debts and restitution owed to the plaintiff. Remaining penalties will be determined in sentencing." The gavel came down with a thunderous crack. The wife buried her face in her hands, sobbing. The mother-in-law shook her head violently, muttering curses under her breath. My husband simply slumped, broken, staring at the floor like a man who had finally met the weight of his own choices. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply breathed, deep, steady, free. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt untangled. The bitterness that had eaten at me was gone, replaced by something sharper, cleaner. Liberation. As I walked out of the courtroom, heads turned, whispers followed, but none of it mattered. What mattered was the sound still echoing in my chest, the gavel, striking like justice itself. Months later, I turned the key in a door no one could take from me. The lock clicked open, and for the first time in a long time, the space waiting on the other side was truly mine. No forged signatures, no stolen savings, no laughter at my expense. Just quiet walls, sunlight streaming across bare floors, and the promise of peace. The house was modest, smaller than the one I had lost, but it was warm. Every corner carried a sense of honesty. The mortgage papers bore only one name, mine. That mattered more than chandeliers, more than wide lawns, more than any illusion of grandeur my ex-husband had tried to dangle in front of me. I set the first box on the kitchen counter and just stood there, letting the silence wrap around me. Memories flickered, his voice dismissing me, her laugh mocking me, the mother-in-law's sneer. For months those sounds haunted me, but in this place they were fading. Their echoes no longer had power. A knock at the door pulled me back. It was one of the neighbors, a kind-faced woman carrying a basket of bread. She smiled warmly. "You stood tall," she said softly. "Not many could have done what you did." I felt my throat tighten. I stood because I refused to kneel. Her eyes glistened, and she squeezed my hand before leaving me to my new beginning. Word had spread, of course. People knew what had happened, how the ones who mocked me ended up tearing themselves apart. My ex-husband was drowning in debt, his wife bitter and angry, the mother-in-law blaming them both. They had their walls, their chandeliers, their cold, echoing rooms, but no trust, no peace, no dignity. Me? I had something better, a foundation built on truth, not lies. Unpacking went slowly, but I savored it. Every photograph I placed, every book I stacked, every curtain I hung. It was like stitching pieces of myself back together. With each step, I wasn't just moving into a house. I was reclaiming my life. I made tea, sat by the window, and let the sunlight touch my face. The taste was simple, but it felt richer than any feast I'd ever shared with those who betrayed me. Because this cup, this chair, this view belonged to me alone, and for the first time in years, I smiled without bitterness. Because revenge wasn't the end of my story. Freedom was. I looked straight ahead, steady and calm. They built walls with my money. I built a life with my strength.